Start our in-cab inspection. In-cab inspection, the first thing you want to do is a safe start. So that way, once you have your safe start done properly and correctly, you're building up air while you're going to be doing the in-cab inspection. So that way you'll save time and your air pressure will build automatically. So with a safe start, this is an automatic truck. Want to make sure your parking brakes are on. Turn your key on, wait for the ABS light and all the lights and needles to do the function check. And once they go off, we'll go ahead and make sure it's in neutral and turn on our truck with the foot on the brake. Alright, so first thing, we're gonna start our in-cab inspection. The first thing will be a seat belt. Making sure the seat belt, it is securely mounted to the frame. No loose fiber, there's no damage to it, no rips, and making sure that it latches and it unlatches as well. I have a fire extinguisher on the left side of my seat, making sure it is properly mounted to the frame, it's not loose, and it's in proper range, it's a proper type, and the pin is in place. Next thing will be your triangles, which are right here. I'm gonna have to get these secured somewhere because they're rolling everywhere. Making sure that we have 3 reflectors in there. These triangles, they are proper color, they're not damaged or missing. I do have fuses right here in my glove box, and I have a city horn and a highway horn. Now we're gonna move on to our next safety items. First one will be my mirrors, the side mirrors. They are clean. There are no illegal stickers on them, making sure that they are properly adjusted to me. Looking at my windshield, it's a cold day. We got some ice out there. I'm making sure there is no damage to it. The rubber seal is present all around, and there are no damage to the windshield. It should be clean, no illegal stickers on it. Next thing we're going to check is our wiper arms and blade. We're missing some washer, so we're going to have to add some washer to it, but making sure that the wiper arms are functional and the blades, there is no damage to the rubber blade, no abrasion, no cuts or no missing chunks out of it, and also making sure the arms are not missing any sort of hardware on it. Next thing we're going to check is our heater and defroster. If you want to have it at the defrost and your feet, defroster and a heat right here. Crank the fan, making sure the defroster is working up here. Turn it to the heat and make sure the heat is also working down here. The demonstration is very important. Now we'll move on to our signal lights right here in the panel, making sure my left turn signal is working. My right turn signal is working. 4-way flasher is also functional, and my high beam also works. And now, since this truck uses the DEF system, we will check another extra thing, which will be a DEF system gauge right here, making sure that you have minimum of 1/8 of a level in your tank. Next, we're going to check the gauges. There are 5 gauges to check. We have water temperature gauge, oil temperature gauge, voltmeter, primary air gauge, and a secondary air gauge. Water temperature gauge, oil temperature gauge, they are rising to the proper level. The needles are functional, and there is no warning light in my panel. Volts should be from 12 to 14. These look a little bit high, 14.5. I'll have the mechanic look at it. For my air gauge number 1 and the second one right here, they're rising to the proper level, which means 120 to 140. The governor should cut off somewhere in between that. I'm gonna accelerate a little bit, fill up the air a little faster, and I'm listening to the governor cut out. The only part left now is our air brake test. I will not start my air brake test unless I have a proper air level. And the proper air level is a governor cutout. Alright, so it looks like our governor already cut out. We probably didn't hear it, but I do have 120 psi and my needles are not going up anymore. So we're going to go ahead and start our air brake test. To do a proper air brake test, you always want to have a proper air in your system. Getting it prepared, I'm going to turn the key off, release the brakes. Since this is an automatic, you want to chock the wheels, which we already did. And turn your key on, and we're going to wait for the needles to settle. Well, my needles are settled at a little low, but 95 psi. Alright, to do your first air brake test, that will be an applied air leak test. I will hold the service brake, and I'm going to hold it for 1 minute and make sure that I don't lose more than 4 psi in a tractor and trailer combination. I'm going to go ahead and start now. Push my service brake. Wait for my needles to settle and my air pressure gauge, primary and the secondary. Now they're settled, and I'll start the timer. It's very important to know how to read the gauges. Before we started this test, our needles settled at around 85 to 88, and I have not seen the needles move yet, and we're almost done with the minute. Alright, the minute is over. Want to read your gauges before you release your foot off the service brake. Needles did not move, so I did not lose any pressure at all. And that's a successful test. Now we're going to move on to our second air brake test, which is low air warning device or light test. For that, I will keep fanning my service brake. Once the pressure drops down around 60 or 55, my lights at the primary air gauge and the secondary air gauge should come on. The pressure is at 55 in the primary and the 60 on the secondary air gauge, and lights came on and I can hear the buzzer as well. We're gonna keep fanning the service brakes. Once the pressure drops down anywhere from 40 to 20 psi, my parking brake for the trailer and tractor should come out itself. Do not touch them. So we're gonna start fanning our service brake. My parking brakes for both my spring brakes did pop out. My primary air gauge is at 25 and the secondary is at 30. That's a successful test. Now we're gonna do our second safe start. To do that, make sure your parking brakes are applied. Your truck is in neutral, and I will turn the key on. Wait for the self-test. Once the ABS light and all the other lights go off, put a foot on the brake and start your truck. I'm going to go ahead and accelerate the pedal to bring the pressure up to 85 psi, and once it reaches 85 psi, we will stop the acceleration and we'll let the pressure build on its own from 85 to 100 psi within 45 seconds itself. Alright, so pressure is at 85 psi, and I'm going to go ahead and start the timer for 45 seconds. So 45 seconds are over, and it did not build the pressure from 85 to 100 psi within that 45 seconds. Now we're going to try that with a primary air gauge. Once that reaches at 85, we're going to start our timer for 45 seconds and see if it reaches 100 psi on its own. It's 85 psi right now. I'm going to go ahead and start the timer. There we go. This is the gauge we're looking at. Oh, my primary gauge has reached 100 psi already, with still 8 seconds left to it. So that tells me that my governor is working properly. It's sorry, my air compressor is building proper air. Let's go ahead and build the air pressure to the proper level. That is 120 to 140 psi on this particular truck. There is a sneeze, and the governor cut out at 125 psi. Now we're going to do our parking brake test. Once you have a proper air, you will release your trailer brake trailer brake. Have your truck in a drive. The tractor does not move, or my vehicle does not move. Now we're gonna test our tractor brake. So apply your trailer brake. Sorry, the other way around. We're gonna release our tractor brake. We're gonna test our trailer brake now. The first one we did was for the tractor. Same process. With the tractor brakes released and the trailer brakes on, give a little acceleration and the vehicle does not go anywhere. That's a successful test. Now we're going to do our last test. That is a service brake test. We're going to drive up approximately 5 miles an hour, and make sure you do drive 5 miles an hour. And once you hit the service brake, make sure your steering wheel does not pull one side or another, and your vehicle actually stops with the service brake. So let's go ahead and release your tractor and trailer brake.
Put your foot on the brake. Put your foot on the brake.
Okay, with the drive, you're going to go ahead and pull 5 miles an hour. Make sure you read the gauge correctly. Vehicle does stop and it does not pull to one side or another. That tells me there is no problem with the suspension or any air brake slack. And that's the end of the in-cab inspection. Neutral, apply your brakes, turn off the engine.